A couple of years ago, I wrote a piece about how college football might be vulnerable to a usurper, a new power that takes advantage of the new developments of the day, namely, allowing athletes to transfer more freely and make money off of their name, image and likeness, to rise to or near the top of the sport. It seemed the sport might be capable of producing a new Miami or Florida State programs that rose to usurper prominence in a changing television environment in the 1980s. One of the main characters in that piece was Jackson State coach Deion Sanders. As a player, he was a major factor in FSU's rise, and as a coach, he had recently convinced Travis Hunter, the number 2 prospect in the country, to attend JSU. Sanders was attracting far more talent to Jackson than one would have thought conceivable. It was fun to envision what might happen if he continued to build a powerhouse at Jackson State, and it was intriguing to think about what he might be capable of at a power conference school. About 20 months after he left JSU for Colorado, Sanders remains a disruptor. He has eschewed any norm he can find. He openly cleansed the roster he inherited in Boulder to bring in more than 90 transfers in 2 recruiting cycles. His players displayed their social media handles on the back of their jerseys for a 2023 scrimmage. He delights in holding grudges against local and national media who don't fawn appropriately. And when his Buffaloes began the 2023 season a surprising 3-0, he used his celebrity to attract mega celebrities to Boulder. The first month of the 2023 season was the Colorado show. The Buffaloes rose into the AP Top 20 for the first time in half a decade, following a 3-0 start. People couldn't decide whether to name quarterback Shedeur Sanders or receiver/cornerback Travis Hunter the Heisman favorite. TV ratings for CU games were skyrocketing. The Buffaloes' win over Colorado State drew more viewers than the high-stakes Oregon-Washington Pac-12 championship game would at the end of the year. Their Week 4 visit to Oregon would end up the 3rd most highly rated game of the regular season. The final score of that game, by the way, Oregon 42, Colorado 6. From 3-0, the Buffaloes would fall to 4-8, losing to both good and shaky teams alike. They blew a huge lead and handed Stanford its only Pac-12 win of the season. With the wheels falling off late, they lost by 42 points at Washington State. Sanders demoted respected offensive coordinator Sean Lewis late in the season. Lewis took the San Diego State head coaching job soon after, then moved on from defensive coordinator Charles Kelly in the offseason. Then he stripped his roster down to the studs and loaded up on transfers all over again. Aside from shockingly good player and team ratings in EA Sports CFB 25 video game, it appears most of the Colorado hype has subsided. The Buffaloes received just 1 vote in the preseason AP poll. They were picked 11th out of 16 teams in the freshly expanded Big 12. Their win total at ESPN BET is 5.5, and under has far better odds. For now, the hype train is out of steam. What will it take to get it going again? How does this year's team compare with last year's, and is it better positioned for a full season of success? Can a pair of new coordinators get the most out of the Buffaloes' collection of talent, particularly Shedeur Sanders? And how does CU fit in the new-look Big 12? Sanders won big at Jackson State by simply amassing far more talent than his peers could. In the 2021 and 2022 recruiting classes, he signed not only Hunter and 4-star recruit Shedeur, his son, but also 6 other 4-star prospects, 7 former blue-chip transfers, and a huge number of 3-star transfers. Jackson State went 23-3 in 2021-22, rolling unbeaten through the SWAC both years and losing only to an FBS team, Louisiana Monroe, and in 2 Celebration Bowl upsets. When Sanders landed the Colorado job in December 2022, he landed a quartet of blue chippers in his initial recruiting class: CB Cormani McClain, RB Dylan Edwards, WR Amarian Miller, and wide receiver/defensive back Adam Hopkins. But he did most of his work in the transfer portal. He sent almost all of Colorado's remaining players packing in favor of newcomers. And while there was a seed of logic behind this, namely, that Colorado was one of the worst power conference teams we've ever seen in 2022, and he never intended to be a Bill Snyder-style culture and development guy, he was going to be able to improve the roster only so much in a single offseason. Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter were both immediate hits in the lineup, and other transfers such as receiver Xavier Weaver, outside linebacker Jordan Domenech, and inside linebacker LaVonna Bentley were solid. But a lot of incoming transfers didn't have much of a track record and didn't suddenly develop one in Boulder. Again, develop has never been part of the plan. And the blue-chip freshmen weren't ready-made for success. Edwards was brilliant against TCU in the first game of 2023, but generated a quarter of his full-season yards from scrimmage in that one game and transferred to Kansas State. McClain started 4 games, made almost no memorable plays, and transferred to Florida. Hopkins played 3 games, almost entirely on special teams, and transferred to Charlotte. Only Miller remains, and he started just 2 games and caught just 11 passes, albeit for 234 yards. Line play was especially poor in 2023. Colorado ranked 131st out of 133 teams in offensive line penalties per game and 116th in total blown block rate. On defense, pick your line stat, and the Buffaloes were awful at it. They were 96th in stuff rate, 99th in pressure rate, 120th in rushing success rate allowed, and 114th on third and short. They weren't good at much, but they were particularly poor in the trenches. If there's a reason for hope in 2024, it's because the lines have almost certainly improved. Granted, continuity is a very helpful thing, and the Buffaloes still have none of that. Players responsible for only 7 of last year's 60 offensive line starts return, and Sanders signed 9 new offensive line transfers and 9 new defensive line transfers. But there appears to be more raw talent, at least. On the O-line, guards Justin Mayers, UTEP, and Tyler Johnson, Houston, each earned all-conference votes at their previous schools. Both are 320-plus pounds, and Johnson is a former blue chipper. And while Sanders almost entirely eschewed high school recruiting, he did land 5-star IMG Academy prospect Jordan Seaton, who appears likely to start at left tackle. On defense, Pitt defensive end transfers Dan Hayes and Samuel Okunlola combined for 16 tackles for loss and 9 sacks last season, and Hayes, 17 run stops, was one of the ACC's better run defenders. Fellow transfer BJ Green II made 13 TFLs with 6 sacks, one against Colorado, at Arizona State. Beyond the trenches, other transfers arrive with some combination of a track record and/or former blue chip status. Running backs Isaiah Augustov, Arkansas, and Dallin Hayden, Ohio State, appear to be upgrades, and receiver LaJohntay Wester, Florida Atlantic, caught 108 passes at 2.7 yards per route run last season, both excellent numbers. It's easy to get excited about a receiving core with Hunter, Wester, Jimmy Horn Jr., Miller, Vanderbilt transfer Will Shepard, and NC State transfer Terrell Timmons Jr. Meanwhile, linebacker Jalen Wester, Florida Atlantic, made 9.5 TFLs with 12 run stops, and cornerback Preston Hodge, Liberty, allowed a 35.3 QBR and defended 12 passes, 2 INTs, 10 breakups. Depth could still be a massive issue, one that slowly grinds the Buffaloes down as the season progresses, but this roster appears to have more talent than last year's. Colorado finished last season 48th in offensive SP+, and 113th in defensive SP+. That Sanders changed defensive coordinators, from Charles Kelly to longtime former Cincinnati Bengals DBs coach Robert Livingston, made plenty of sense, but despite significant offensive improvement, Sanders indeed demoted Lewis late in 2023 in favor of another former NFL coach, Pat Shurmur, who was handed the full-time reins in the offseason. The move was confusing for any number of reasons. Over 12 years as either an offensive coordinator or head coach in the NFL, Shurmur oversaw offenses that ranked better than 15th in the league in EPA, expected points added, per play just twice, and ranked 23rd or worse 7 times. Additionally, he called plays in 4 games last season, and Colorado underachieved against SP+ projections in 3 of them and scored more than 19 points just once. The move makes more sense, though, when considering what both Deion and Shedeur Sanders seem to be looking for from the quarterback position. Lewis was the most consistently successful Kent State head coach in half a century, primarily because of a fast-paced offense that was great at stealing easy yards. His Golden Flash offenses tended to have a strong horizontal passing game that made the most of 2-on, 2 or 2-on-1 opportunities on the outside. If defenses were properly spread out, Lewis Flashes took advantage with strong rushing too. Running back Marquez Cooper rushed for more than 2,500 combined yards in 2021 and 22. Neither handoffs nor quick, Horizontal passes showcased the quarterback, however. And Colorado didn't do much of either of those things. Edwards led the team with just 321 rushing yards on 76 carries, 6.3 per game, and 27.6% of CU's passes were thrown at or behind the line of scrimmage, barely over the national average of 25.1%. The run game was poor regardless, but by any account the point of the Colorado offense was to put the ball in Shedeur Sanders' hands and watch him make enough plays to become the #1 pick in the NFL draft. When opponents know you're going to pass, however, and when your offensive line isn't good, you're just begging to get your quarterback hit a lot. And Sanders got hit so much in 2023. He took 52 sacks, tied for most in the country. He was sacked at least 3 times in every game and 7 times on 3 occasions, and he was hit 199 times in all. To be sure, both the offensive line and play calling tendencies had something to do with this. But Sanders' own bad habits played a massive role. It actually took opponents an average of 2.95 seconds per dropback to deliver pressure, higher than the national average and higher than what even the quick-passing Bo Nix faced at Oregon. But Sanders took forever to throw passes, and he trusted his athleticism far too much when it came to escaping pressure. Opponents turned 28.4% of pressures into sacks. Out of 125 QBR-eligible quarterbacks, that rate was the 14th highest. Basically, Sanders was Jaden Daniels if Daniels never threw long passes and never ran the ball. Daniels' playmaking tendencies certainly resulted in unnecessary sacks at times, but he also averaged 16.2 yards per completion and rushed for 1,230 yards outside of sacks. Sanders averaged 10.8 yards per completion, 100th out of those 125 QBs, and rushed for just 381 non-sack yards. And while Daniels did have a pair of first-round receivers at his disposal, Sanders' receiving core was a relative team strength too. Sacks are as much about the QB as his protection, and due in part to the dismal sack rate. Sanders finished his first FBS season ranked a mediocre 57th in total QBR. Shermer has all the pro-style bona fides his boss was clearly looking for, and if he uses what he has learned to create easy pitch-and-catch opportunities for Hunter, Wester, Horn and company while maybe creating better fundamentals and reliability in the run game, then CU's offense could improve further. But if the goal of hiring a pro-style guy was simply to have Shedeur Sanders try to make even more pro-style throws, he's going to be just as limited by pressure and sacks as he was last year. I obviously have misgivings about Shedeur Sanders' pocket presence, but in Sanders and Hunter, Colorado is still guaranteed to have 2 of the 3 or 4 best players in every game it plays this fall. Hunter is a genuine star, a good receiver and good cornerback who would be one of the best in the country at either position if he wasn't playing both ways and recording far more snaps per game than anyone else in the country.